Strength through action, strength through community, strength through courage. Sounds like a great mantra, doesn't it? Sounds like something a true leader would say. And more importantly, it does sound like an honorable thing for those being led to follow, right? Or wrong? Well, this is a quote from a book I'm sure most of you have either read or heard about, The Wave, by Todd Strasser. The story of an experiment run by a well-respected history teacher at a high school. An experiment to explore how quickly the mind of a follower can be controlled. And it wasn't long before students were chanting the slogan in unison, marching down the halls in salutation, and executing the teacher's every demand, all in the name of strength. Turns out, the book is based on a true story of a similar incident in a high school in California, 1969. A teacher's attempt to demonstrate Hitler's rise to power through a practical lesson for the kids. An attempt that, in Strasser's novel, led to both leaders and led getting carried away, discriminated students within the school getting physically assaulted, and nearly absolute disaster striking. So, what is the lesson to extract? The world consists of two types of people, those who lead and those who are led. No matter how badly you want to distance yourself from that reality by claiming that you stand somewhere in the middle, it is inherently inevitable that you will be one of the two in any given scenario. Which one is much less important than how you approach either role, because both must be done with integrity. A leader is only as strong as those who follow, and a follower only as strong as who they are led by. Now, for the sake of this talk, we will reduce the meaning of leader primarily to political leaders, as those tend to do the most damage. So, I'm going to go study politics at university. I know, it's a really good time to be specializing in that field. I just think that when we talk about redefining limits and we take a look at the world around us, there are quite a few limits, specifically to do with politics, that are screaming at us to get redefined. I mean, comparing political limits throughout history to those set in place today is absolutely depressing. Nothing has changed. Literally from the Bible, I'm Christian, up until today, we have never once taken a step back and said, hey, we should probably stop killing each other and actually enforced it. Even more depressing, though, is how these tragedies come to be. You see, the choice to cross such limits rests with the leaders of the world. I find it much more interesting, however, to focus on the followers. And in light of recent events, I think it essential to take a step back and reconsider the kind of followers that we are. Political leaders rise either through desperation or through admiration. When they feel threatened, people want to be led by power. Threatening situations call for threatening leaders, a subconscious means of restoring balance. When they feel safe and are looking to flourish, they seek a role model, someone they admire, someone they have time to care about. Are we seeing the issue with this? The issue is that followers often live vicariously through their leaders. When a leader exerts power in one way or another, the nation will feel powerful. Now, this can be both good or bad from an objective standpoint, but it is usually more damaging than it is beneficial, because it taints a follower's ability to think clearly. As they live vicariously, they become emotionally attached to their leaders, and as they become emotionally attached, they become easily influenced and manipulated. We've seen this phenomenon time and time again, and Hitler's story is not its sole example. We have Joseph Stalin with his cult of personality, and the press referring to him as the father of nations. He became the muse for art and literature and creative devotion, all whilst the Soviet Union suffered 20 million deaths, a million of which, by the way, were local citizens executed by Stalin himself. We have King Leopold II, King of Belgium, promised that he would end the slave trade in Congo, under the pretext, of course, that he would become full monarch of the state. He did indeed end the slave trade for a while, only to then enforce his own choices of torture, including rape, mutilation, and murder. 10 million people died. Up until a few years ago, a statue of the man, that one, was considered one of Belgium's most monumental tourist attractions, and no one thought anything of it. The thing is that the narratives of these leaders transcend through generations. Racism exists solely because colonizers needed a pseudo-excuse to commit genocide for some extra land. And now, decades later, descendants of those victims face discrimination every day. Think of all the manipulation involved from all sides in the ever-present argument over the correct religion. When has a discussion over the correct religion ever not been politically driven? All the painful fights over basic human rights just because some leader, or a number of them, once convinced millions of people to discriminate against them for the sole purpose of carrying out their own political agenda. Ironically, most people don't like the idea of being a follower, and they are under the delusion that they are not one. At the very same time, all a leader needs to say these days is, I'm bringing down your taxes and the vote is secured. Never mind the economy, never mind national security, military action, healthcare, human rights, never mind all that. There's a negative connotation associated with being a so-called follower, when in reality, it is the followers that make the biggest difference. It is the follower that chooses the leader, not the other way around. Even in the most dire of situations, even when your life is on the line, the choice of following is still a choice. And that choice is a leader's sole source of strength. Now, I know what you're all going to say. No, what about dictators? Well, dictators only become dictators once they've already somehow managed to convince millions of people of good intentions so that they can then go to office and say, just kidding. I just think that the fundamental issue is that most people follow in subordination, and they don't follow in respect. And that allows for a leader to not only lead a country, but to lead the minds of the individuals. I also think that leadership as we know it today has become way too personal. True political leadership should focus on leading a cause, not leading individuals. Your political leader is not your parent. Making leadership personal leads to emotional dependency and manipulation. People look to political leaders to solve problems that go way beyond the political and governmental. They cling to the promise of stability, of strength, and they've been manipulated into thinking that they cannot provide anything for themselves. Now, a political leader has the ability to alter your quality of life drastically. And of course, this is of utmost priority, especially in lower income countries. It's just that political leaders rely on your emotional dependency. They rely on you feeling like you don't have a choice. But we as a society need to take responsibility. You're not a sheep. You're a human being with the same physiological makeup as the leaders you deem as gods and trust with your lives. You cannot simply settle on being a follower. You cannot simply trust. People die when leaders aren't kept in check. Money is thrown out the window. Walls are built in really stupid places. And ultimately, by the time people finally get the oh moment, when they realize they're now paying double the amount at the grocery store, or their country is no longer killing as much as they're getting killed themselves, it's usually too late. So, what are some things to look out for? Let's brainstorm. Nationalism. As stated before, even though it sounds wonderful, your political leader is not your mom nor your dad, and your country is not your family. That narrative is set solely to create a we against them mentality and to stretch the boundaries of your moral integrity. Something else, utopian promises. Matter of fact, any mention of any kind of utopian visions at all, utopia does not exist. There's no perfect world, and there's no perfect state, which means that the actions a leader can take to ensure a utopian state are endless. Wipe out an ethnic minority. Not quite utopian yet. Introduce communism. No, not quite there yet. Do you see where I'm going with this? Okay. Well, as terrible as I've made leadership sound, there's no world without it. And in fact, leadership can do incredible things when placed in the right possession. If it weren't for leadership, we'd all still be sitting in caves, trying to form a common language. My narrative is not to say that you are either a leader or a follower for life. I'm telling you that you must be both simultaneously. No matter who you follow, you must always lead yourself. Whilst leaders may send a command, it is followers that pull the trigger. Whilst a leader may declare a narrative, it is the followers that give it life. My contribution to tonight's TEDx event is to remind you to not take the decision of which narratives you give life to lightly. And it's to point out that right now, history is repeating itself yet again, and that taking responsibility for the kind of leaders that you support and the kind of followers that you are is long overdue. Thank you.